Welcome back to another episode of the Chicagolandians, a casual sports podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Cunningham, joined as always by my co-host, Connor Cunningham.
We're two brothers from the Chicagoland area who love exploring every corner of the sports world. Each week, we break down sports stories, ideas, and theories in a way that's simple and fun.
Whether you're a lifelong fan or just curious about the game, there's something here for everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Chicagolandians. I'm your host, Patrick Cunningham, joined as always by Connor Cunningham.
Yellow.
Apologize to any visual viewers. My hair is wet. I just came out of the shower and I just had a fresh shave.
I was going to guess why your hair was
I apologize to all the viewers. But welcome back. We have a very exciting episode for you today. We are just coming off the All-Star weekend for the NBA and also the Foreign Nations weekend.
Ooh.
And those two games will be the focus of today's episode. We wanted to compare and contrast the differences between the two competitions and why one competition, spoiler, the Foreign Nations game, was such a resounding success, while the NBA continues to be a lackluster product that I think has now just kind of become a punching bag for everybody, but that's for later discussion.
Now, Pat, I'm going to jump in here real quick.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is crazy to say, but biggest difference between the two, without a doubt, has to be the ice and the court, right?
100%.
One is skating, the other is running. I feel like that, right off the bat, that just makes it two very different sports, right?
But before that, we have, of course, some Chicago sports news to talk about. First thing up, we have the Chicago Bears. Now, we'll say, following the Super Bowl and before NFL Combine, draft hype, before free agency, this is definitely what we have labeled in the show doc a slow news cycle. We do not have a lot to talk about, except Ian Cunningham has conducted his second interview with the Jaguars. Now, Connor, I thought Ian Cunningham was already hired by the Jags as their GM. So did they backtrack that? And now they're still in limbo with their GM, but have the head coach already? How did that work?
So I think the initial Chicagolandings reporting might have been jumping the shark there by saying he was hired. You know, we get a lot of sources from all kind of walks of life, and some sources are more reliable than the others. So it seems like, you know, maybe that one didn't work out. We didn't do our investigative due diligence, but I'll wear that on my sleeve. I'll take that on the chest. It's my bad.
You know, Connor, the problem with this whole world we live in now, it's a race to be first.
Well, it's a cycle. It's a news cycle.
And we want to control the narrative, and we're victims of that right now. But it does make me wonder who hired the head coach. But I don't know how that decision came about.
Very interesting. Yes, the Liam Cohen hired before even the GM is there.
Yeah.
Now, we've seen this before with Matt Eberflus being pseudo-hired before Ryan Poles was hired, and that didn't work out great for the Bears, so I guess we'll see. It is such a slow news cycle that people on Twitter have noticed that the Bears Wire Twitter has started tweeting just random political articles. Like yesterday they put out an article that was titled, "It's President's Day, ? Are banks open? Here's what Mississippi residents should know." And this was uploaded to their random Twitter. So I think it is a very slow news cycle right now. People got to pay the bills. People are uploading random content. Maybe next week we'll do our tax episode, or maybe some coupons or something like that.
Thoughts on those new tariffs? What we got to say about those? Yeah.
God, the greatest word in the English dictionary.
But moving on, for some Chicago Bulls news, Matas Buzelis make an appearance this All-Star weekend, not only in the Rising Star competition, where I think he put on a good showcase. He had some good dunks and a good behind-the-back pass. But his main focus of the night was participating in the NBA dunk contest, which, as we'll get in later, should be one of the most exciting events of the All-Star weekend, and still is, thanks to Mac McClung. But in years past, I think of Aaron Gordon, Zach LaVine's dunk contest, the greatest dunk contest ever to be. Michael Jordan jumping from the free throw line. The dunk contest has fallen off a lot since then, but Matas still competed, and had kind of a rocky start. Connor, I don't know if you watched his performance, but his first dunk, he actually did not complete successfully. This was a dunk I saw him do, I think in high school for a McDonald's dunk contest. He tried to go behind the basket, bounce the ball in the air between his legs, grab it, dunk it.
It's a sweet looking dunk.
Super sweet dunk that I don't think I had seen before. And it looked very, very difficult, but he missed.
Did he punch it in high school? Or did he get it in high school?
Yes, he definitely, I saw him complete it successfully. So I know he can do it, but that's obviously with a much smaller crowd without so many people watching you. He couldn't finish his first dunk attempt. He tried it like
that's tough
3
to
or 4
open
times.
with that.
Yeah, I think maybe if he continues to compete in the dunk contest, maybe he'll learn that after the second or third attempt, you got to just go with a safer dunk, because putting a 0 on the board for the first round when McClung,
You cannot do that.
yeah, is putting up 50s every time, you gotta get on the scoreboard.
Mac is jumping over cars and you're not even putting the ball in the rim.
Modest for his second dunk did do a cool from the side up in reverse from under the rim. That was pretty good. Didn't get him a ton of points, and obviously the damage was already done from not completing a dunk in the first round, but unfortunately he finished 4th in the dunk contest. Now, Connor, did you watch the dunk contest at all? I will say Mac and Castle did have some pretty sweet dunks.
I only saw, I think, Castle's first dunk. I think it was like a 360 windmill. And I saw McClung's over the car dunk, which I thought was sweet. And then I saw Modest's. I saw both of his dunks.
Yeah.
That was tough to see. And then, you just know that he has to be freaking out internally.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And especially to spend, 2 minutes trying to land that dunk. It's got to be tough. Glad that Mac McClung is there to at least make it interesting. I don't think the dunk contest is broken. I think they just need to do a better job of picking the people to compete in it. And I know not everyone is willing to compete in it, but I feel like the dunk contest was bad, and then just randomly Zach LaVine and Aaron Gordon were in it and tried really hard.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if it's something that needs fixing, but I think it's just tough sometimes when you seemingly put random people in it. I still think it's very fun to watch, though.
Oh, 100%. Well, the problem is it's different than the 3-point contest, where the 3-point contest doesn't take any outside work from the player, right? They're practicing shooting threes every single game. That's what the NBA is nowadays. But the dunk contest requires so much creativity and thinking and planning beforehand, coming up with the choreography for all of your dunks and having to practice all of your dunks should take a lot of time out of your day. I mean, there's professional dunkers for a reason, right? This is a whole thing that you can commit yourself to. So it's not as simple as taking all of the best dunkers and putting them in and just hoping that you still need to rely on them to like put the work in outside to practice their dunks and come up with cool presentations.
Yeah, it wasn't like Aaron Gordon was at Magic practice in Orlando Magic practice, not magician practice. It was just practicing his mascot hoverboard dunks, like while the other team all the other players were running suicides or something. But yeah, that is a good point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The other point I would make is Modest, since becoming a starter, has started
news to me.
Has started to really make a case for himself for Rookie of the Year. I think it's still pretty far away, but I think this is a pretty contested Rookie of the Year competition, especially compared to last year with Wemby. At the start of the year, it really seemed like 76ers Jared McCain was shooting out in front, but he had to have season-ending surgery, so was unable to complete the season. And now it's kind of looking like Castle from the Spurs was having a really good season, and he's kind of leading the race right now. But for Modest Buzelis, since becoming a starter, he's actually leading rookies in scoring with 14.1 points per game and shooting 60% from the field and, most importantly, 42% from three-point line. If you guys remember our first breakdown when we drafted him, his biggest flaw, he was a terrible three-point shooter. So it's great to see him actually improve those numbers. Now, I think this is only a 4-game sample, but it is very exciting to see a rookie like this make such a big impact so early in his career. Connor, do you have any thoughts?
It looks like right now on DraftKings, he is the 9th leader in odds, or he's the 9th best odds to win Rookie of the Year. So Stephon Castle is at plus 140 on DraftKings, and Modest is at plus 4,000. But, we just had All-Star, so there's still a lot of season left to play. But I agree. It is nice to see him start playing well and especially shoot the ball better. I feel like that was the main thing. Like you said, we were saying where this guy could just put the shot together like he was supposed to in G League. He would have gone top 3 in the draft. So it's nice to see him starting to put his full game together.
Yeah. Next up for Illinois basketball, we have some disappointing news. Freshman Morris Johnson Jr. is out indefinitely rest of the season with a broken wrist. Maybe the nail in the coffin for this Illinois team, kind of putting the kids to bed.
This is it.
Illinois is currently 17-9, unranked. We just lost a game to Michigan State. Morris Johnson,
Highest effort player, too. Very high effort player.
huge effort. In a season of disappointment, this seems really to be maybe the end for Illinois basketball. But who knows? The one thing I'll say about this team is we are incredibly explosive. Definitely not consistent, but maybe when it comes tournament time, we will just get really, really hot and blow the doors off all the teams. I think that's the only way we make a serious run at the tournament.
Yeah, I think that's all we can hope for. I think this is a frustrating season. Continues to be frustrating with now Morez being hurt. Who knows, though, when that tournament rolls around, there's been a lot of unimpressive teams throughout the regular seasons who have suddenly turned into March Madness darlings. Maybe that could be Illinois.
Hopefully. Well, moving on to our next section of the podcast. This section, we do not, unfortunately, have a review of the week.
This is honestly so sad.
This was maybe the darkest time.
I honestly did not want to record today, but
we have no reviews of the week. So for anybody listening out there, for any other retired NFL legends, Bears players,
doesn't even need to be related to the Bears. Could be anybody. Could just be a regular person.
If you guys want your review read out, we would be happy to read them. If you guys just want to send us a nice text message, we'll be happy to read them. But we just wanted to still shout out a nice piece of content that we're putting out and some engagement that we have had with the growing Chicagolandians community. So if you guys remember, last week we recorded an interview with On Tap Sports' Quentin Crisco talking about the Chicago Bears' potential draft pick at number 10, where he made the bold prediction that if he had to put $100 on it, given all the circumstances and certain caveats, he thought Ashton Jeanty would be the number 10 pick for the Bears. And that sparked a lot of controversy on Instagram and Twitter. We were overwhelmed with the response. I mean,
I couldn't even use my phone. It was too much response.
I mean, I will say, because Connor tagged Q in this tweet and he retweeted it, it does have 2,500 impressions. So it did get a big response. But one guy specifically, shout out Jay McCarron, he and Q had a real shouting match in the comments talking about the value of drafting a running back at number 10 versus addressing our line issues. I just wanted to shout out one specific tweet from Jay in response to Q's reply to one of his tweets. He says, "No, exclamation point, no RBs in the first round. O-line, D-line only. How are you an O-line guy, but you want an RB over Campbell at left guard? Tyler Booker, Kelvin Banks, Shamar Stewart, Mike Green, Mikael Williams?" A very passionate fan we have here with the right to his opinion, and I think a pretty reasonable opinion, certainly, especially after seeing last year's performance with our offensive line travesty and the failures of our defensive line. Not wanting us to take a shiny new running back, I think, is a very fair opinion. I think Q is also entitled to his opinion. But
now, also, his opinion was if you had to say who the pick is, not who you want them to pick.
Exactly.
I think that's a distinction to make. I think that somewhat of a witch hunt, as people would say, for Q. I think that he received a lot of flack for that comment. And I think the question was, if you had to put $100 on it, who do you think the pick will be? Not should be. Well, regardless, we appreciate the engagement. It's a lot of engagement. It's really been nice to see. Follow us on Twitter. There's a lot of good content coming out there.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this was our first tweet that really got like a real reply going. It was pretty fun to follow. Very happy to see some passionate fans talking about their Bears takes. So moving on to the main, as Connor likes to say, main meat and potatoes of this episode, we are going to be covering the Four Nations tournament from the NHL. So for the uninitiated, the Four Nations tournament replaced the All-Star game for the NHL. Like most professional sports leagues right now, the the NHL was struggling to find a way to make the NHL All-Star Game competitive. There's a lot of factors that go into this that we'll touch on later, but the main thing is it is hard to incentivize professional players who have to sacrifice their bodies in super physical games to compete in a seemingly meaningless tournament.
There's no stakes, yeah.
Yeah, there's no stakes, exactly. So the NHL's solution to this was to completely scrap the All-Star Game and replace it with a 4-nations tournament, which is where, of the NHL players, they separated all of the players into 4 teams: Sweden, Finland, Canada, and obviously the United States,
America,
and pitted them all against each other in a round-robin style tournament that will culminate in a championship game this Thursday between the United States and Canada. But even from the start, the first game smashed expectations that the NHL had set for themselves. The first game, US v Finland, averaged 1.5 million viewers on ESPN, which exceeded the 1.4 million average viewers that the All-Star Game received last year. And this 1.5 million viewers actually beat all 3 previous All-Star Games for the NHL. So already a huge success. And on Saturday, we had what seems to be the culminating event of the whole series. We had US v Canada. Connor, did you watch this game?
I watched highlights of it. Honestly, I did not watch it live, though, unfortunately.
This was incredibly exciting. Checking Twitter on Saturday was maybe one of the most patriotic days that I had had in a while. Something that felt like it had brought the entire nation together in unity in a time of hatred and anger. It made people feel a little bit closer together and proud to be Americans. And we actually defeated Canada 3-1. And this game was electric. Even from before the game started, Canada booed the U.S. national anthem, and 9 seconds into the game, we had already had 3 fistfights between each team, including at the initial puck drop. The 2 Tkachuk brothers on the United States dropped their gloves instantly and got in a fistfight with 2 Canadians, really setting the tone in their words to say, hey, we're here. It is our time right now. And for the rest of the game, there were so many clips on Twitter of how electric it was. And what really stood out about this game was how passionate not only the fans' reception of it was, but how passionate the players themselves were. After each goal, seeing their excitement, celebrating with their teammates, it really stood out with just how well received this game was. And it led a lot of people to wonder, how can the NHL, a league that is not as popular as leagues like the NBA or the NFL, how they were able to be so successful in putting all of the top talent together and make a competitive and very entertaining product, while all the other leagues fail to do so.
Now, I will say, with the Tkachuk brothers, I thought what was the funniest thing was when the puck dropped, Matthew Tkachuk of the Panthers got in a fight right away. That fight happened, send him off to the box, there's a big pause in the game. Then they reset, game gets going. And then next puck drop, Brady gets in a fight. And then they just join each other in the box. You can see them dap each other up. Just have a lot of brotherly energy. And I just think it's so funny that while the initial fight is going on, Brady's probably just surveying the ice, figuring out whose ass am I going to kick. Now, I will say, in the 3 fights that they had, I will be honest, the U.S. probably lost 2 of them, I felt like. Especially the third fight, that guy got his ass kicked. But Brady, I think, definitely beat the Canadian.
Well, how do you think you can tell who wins the hockey
It's
fight?
whoever throws the other guy to the ice.
Whoever falls
that's
down is the one that loses, I think, right?
One, without a doubt, yeah.
So why do people actually care about this game? What was different about this All-Star Game compared to all the other ones in the past? I think it comes down to just national pride. When you put on your jersey for your nation in front of 1.5 million people, the stakes are raised just a little bit more. In the words of Matthew Tkachuk, he says, I think just coming here, it brings me right back to the Stanley Cup Finals. It has the same mindset, the same stuff leading into it. These games, to me and my team, this is as big as it gets. We're talking 4 Game 7s. And he means Game 7 of the Stanley Cup.
Stanley Cup Finals.
Okay? So pretty big deal to these guys. He says you want to play in these games is what you dream of, the best on best. So the intensity will ramp up very, very fast. So I think that's just the main answer right there. When you put people in their national team's jerseys, they want to represent their nation well. Especially what is unique about the NHL is that there is the right amount of concentration of talent, but not too much concentration that you are able to field for relatively competitive teams compared to other leagues. Like, as we'll see, professional league like the NBA or the NFL, the talent is way too concentrated into just America that you can't really produce that many competitive teams. So the NHL, having a lot of players concentrated in 4 teams of Finland, Sweden, Canada, and US, created the perfect environment to have this competitive tournament style series.
Yeah, so with that nationality breakdowns, the NHL, if you break the NHL, just active NHL players down by nations, there's 5 main countries that make up the NHL. That's Canada being the overwhelming majority, then the United States, Sweden, Russia, and then Finland. So Canada makes up about 45% of those players, with the US making about 31%, Sweden making 10%, Russia 7%, and Finland 6%. So for comparison, Canada has 394 current players in the NHL, with Finland having 51. The issue is that when you look at the United States, the breakdown, while there is a lot of players from different areas and different countries around the world, the breakdown is far more severe. In the US, there are 453 current players in the NBA, where 88% of current players in the NBA are from the United States. Canada makes up just 5%, France 2%, Australia 2%, and Germany almost 2%. So there's a far less diverse breakdown nationally in the NBA.
I'll say another reason I think this game was so passionate was this was the first time in 10 years that we have seen Canada versus the United States playing each other, or true international hockey being played competitively. Now, this was news to me, but next year in 2026 for the Olympics, that will be the first time the NHL has sent professional hockey players to the Olympics since 2014. So it will be over 10 years. Yeah. So it'll be over 10 years since we have actually had competitive hockey at an international level. In 2018, the NHL had some disputes over insurance costs and travel. It seemed like there was a lot of disputes over logistics, so the NHL had to pull their players out kind of at the last minute. And then 2022, there were still concerns over COVID-19 with travel restrictions and just scheduling.
COVID changed everything.
Made things very difficult. So, Connor, if you actually pop quiz here, do you know who won the Beijing 2022 Olympic Games ice hockey?
Did China win it?
Finland won.
Oh, okay.
With Russia coming in second, known as ROC, and then Slovakia winning the bronze. But I'm pretty sure all 3 of these teams had no NHL
Was it
players.
just amateurs playing?
Yeah, I think it was just amateur players the whole time. So you've got 10 years of no international hockey, all of that kind of rage and energy boiling up inside of all of these professional players. I'm sure there's a lot of trash talk in the locker rooms. A lot of people saying, no, Canada does it best. And then all the Kachuk brothers are like, you know what? No, US does it best. And all of that tension boils up and finally comes to a head at the Four Nations tournament and really leads to what we've seen now. And this kind of seems like the NHL is kind of on the rise right now. We've got future NHL plays. I think the NHL might be back. Or this Four Nations tournament seems to bring a lot of new viewers to the NHL. And watching the game, I watched the Finland-US game and I watched a little bit of the Canada-US game. Competitive hockey is so fun to watch. There's electric. Nothing like it.
It's like watching soccer, but just so much faster, with people always meeting each other on breakaways, everybody seeming to be in each other's heads. Like everyone can read each other's minds, just passing in these very tight alleys to score goals. It's very pretty. Yeah. Playoff hockey is incredible, and I feel like the Four Nations so far has been like just playoff hockey on steroids. Now, I'll say I've only watched fully the U.S. versus Sweden game, which was kind of a meaningless game, but even that was still a lot of fun to watch. I mean, hockey is just a very fun sport to watch. And, I mean, it's sanctioned fighting as well. Like, no other sport has that besides boxing or UFC, which is the sport. No one, then you're not just allowed to fight.
Yeah. Well, Connor, do you have anything else to talk about with the Four Nations tournament specifically, or do you want to move into the comparison with the NBA?
Well, I guess my last comment is, so it's called the Four Nations Face Off. Did you think they thought about naming it the Four Nations Skate Off, or what did you think about that?
I think they certainly thought of that. I mean, certainly somebody had to.
That's just all I wanted to know.
If nobody said that, we need some new minds in the NHL.
I agree. Okay, no, we can move on.
Well, that leads us to the comparing and contrasting of this episode, because on Saturday, having to compete with US v Canada in one of the most patriotic games maybe ever, it had to compete with the NBA skills competition, and it kind of made people wonder how the NBA is doing it just so much worse than the NHL, or how the NHL was able to figure out, literally just with one change, they were able to make such a good product.
Yeah, this one weird trick.
And the NBA still struggles. Now, I don't want to make this point like a whole bashing the All-Star game, because I think at this point, from doing my own research, the main thing with the NBA...
do your own research, guys. Do your own research.
People critiquing the NBA All-Star game, that's like maybe the lowest hanging fruit there is with the NBA right now. And I think it's pretty lame to hate on the NBA All-Star game, especially for a game that doesn't have any incentive. There's no stakes for the players and no reason for them to try, right? And all fans are focused on, when they talk about the legacy of players, who the hell cares about the NBA All-Star game, right? All people care about is big blockbuster trades and the finals, right? So why do they all pretend like when it's All-Star weekend that the All-Star game is suddenly the most important thing that they want, and critiquing all of the players for having poor performances?
I know. I don't think about the All-Star weekend at all throughout my entire 365 days. And the 2 days that it comes, I just go on Twitter and see that, I guess the world's ending because there's 400 points scored in the All-Star game.
Yeah. But the NBA, obviously for financial reasons, is still trying to figure out a way to make people want to care about the All-Star weekend. Similar to the NFL, they're constantly revamping the competitions, trying to find some way to get the players to care about it. So this year we had a new format with the help of Golden State Warriors point guard Steph Curry. He helped kind of change up the format for the All-Star game. If you don't know, last year there were over 400 combined points in the All-Star game, and that kind of made all of the people take a pause and say, maybe we need to change something for this year. Maybe we need to do something different. So this year, instead of one 48-minute game, it was broken down into 3 shorter games. It was a race to score 40 points, which, from reading articles from ESPN, it did seem like it made it a more competitive game than years past. Obviously, you're not going to be seeing like Game 7 competitiveness, but it did make it more competitive than years past. But it still incentivizes the main issue that a lot of people have with the NBA, where it rewards people for being incredibly athletic and just able to run down and shoot as many threes and be fantastic three-point shooters, which I would argue speaks to just the evolution of the game and just how good players have gotten. And to get upset at that, I think brings up questions about having to change the rules of the NBA. Like, you were asking players to, the strategy clearly works, right? Like, that is how you win games. You score the most points by getting 3 points. And if everybody can shoot the same from 3-point line as like a long 2, why wouldn't you just shoot 3 points?
The NBA is built on the 3-point line. Analytics has said that that's just the best way to win games. So now if you combine all of the best 3-point shooters onto 2 teams and de-emphasize defense, I feel like that's how this ends up working. Is just the teams jack up threes a lot and then you score 400 points.
Despite the game being a little more competitive, people on Twitter and people hosting the game didn't let anybody off the hook. And basically the entire weekend, people were complaining about how garbage the whole presentation is, and makes you wonder what can be done. I think there were still some positive takeaways, mainly that being the dunk contest and the 3-point contest. Now, we've hit on the dunk contest with Modest Buzelis, but as Connor mentioned, Mac McClung winning 3 years in a row did spark some stirring on Twitter, which honestly I feel like kind of happens every year.
That happens every year.
Every year a player is like, oh, maybe I should compete. But this year, John Morant did comment that seeing Mac win 3 years in a row makes him want to go dunk. And then Zach LaVine said it might make him come out too. And then the other highlight is the three-point contest, which I think at this point has become the main event of the All-Star weekend, especially because the whole All-Star weekend, all anybody asked all of the NBA players was their thoughts on the current state of the NBA. So I feel like the three-point contest is now a chance for all of the NBA players to defend the core part of their current state of the league. So everyone seems to take it pretty seriously.
There's also, there's no load in the three-point contest either.
For sure.
Like, you can get hurt dunking the ball, or in the All-Star game, you could hurt yourself. Shooting a bunch of three-pointers, you can't really get too hurt from doing that.
Yeah. So Tyler Hero ended up winning this three-point contest, squashing Dame Lillard's three-peat chances. Buddy Hield also hit 31 points in his first round, which I think was tying the NBA record or maybe beating the NBA record. Another highlight was the Mr. Beast shooting contest, where he had one fan face off against Damian Lillard for $100,000.
It was interesting to watch this random guy, Jaren, who they took down from the stands, or I don't know, maybe they met him beforehand, went off in a logo three-point contest against Damian Lillard and won. So Lillard had to make 3 logo shots before Jaren would make 1, and Jaren ended up winning. But God, Mr. Beast is just such a nothing burger. He's the definition of a nothing Mr. Beast burger. That's that's just my opinion on him. But it was interesting to watch him. Damian Lillard was a good sport about the whole thing, and it's always exciting to see a guy win a bunch of big pile of cash. Now, I'll just say one thing. The thing you said about Draymond Green poking fun at it, and I agree, it's like once the critique gets so mainstream that literally the event is criticizing itself, it's gone too far.
Yeah.
But Draymond Green, it's crazy that Draymond Green is criticizing it as if 3 years ago he wasn't playing in an NBA All-Star game, or 7 years ago I think he was a 3-time All-Star. Like, he was going balls to the walls when he was playing in the All-Star game. Like, come on, man, you understand how it works too. Like, it's ridiculous to just tell people that they should be going like all out during this like random no stakes game.
100%. And Kevin Durant on Monday after the game, he went on a huge Twitter spree responding to a lot of people criticizing the game. And I thought he made some pretty good points where people pointed to Kobe Bryant being very passionate about All-Star games. And he brought up that even back then in that state of the game, most of the game was not taken very seriously, but then when it came down to it in the fourth quarter, that's when people really started to ramp up the competitiveness. But now with today's NBA, that you can't really have that anymore because of how fast-paced the game is and how high scoring it is just with three-pointers, right? Back then, in the first 3 quarters, people not really trying would result in a lot of really sweet dunks and like alley-oops and really cool mid-ranges. But nowadays, that kind of low-effort play for first 3 quarters ends up with 150 points being scored, right? So by the time it's the fourth quarter to actually ramp up and start playing, you're going to be down 40 points, right? So if you want a competitive game, you're going to have to play competitive for 4 straight quarters, right? So just it's another example of the current state of the NBA as a result kind of leads to a game like this. And it's a bigger problem than to just ask all of the players to try and like
To try harder.
to try harder. Yeah, there's so much at play here just with the NBA as a whole to try to fix this. But what can be done? Our last segment, we're going to talk about what can they do to kind of mimic what the Four Nations tournament did for the NHL. Is that something possible with the NBA? Now, we kind of already saw a little bit of this year in the NBA All-Star Game with the 4 teams that were all drafted. Shaq had a team that was Shaq's OGs, which was a lot of the best American players from the NBA, like Steph Curry, LeBron, Kevin Durant. And Charles Barkley's team was more of an international team where he had people like Jokic and Wembanyama. He had his global stars. So we kind of already saw a little bit of America versus other nations playing out. What are some alternatives? Connor, do you want to talk about the alternatives that you have listed here?
Yeah, sure. So the alternatives that you could do is simply a 4 nations tournament, like they did in the NHL by just picking the 4 largest nations or the largest national representations in the NBA. So that would be the US, Canada, France, and Australia. The obvious problem that comes with this is that the US and Canada would, without a doubt, have the strongest teams. France would still have a competitive team with players like Victor Wembanyama and Rudy Gobert, but Australia would have a horrendous team with I guess Kyrie Irving, but Josh Giddey being the headline player and Ben Simmons. So they would have very weak teams, but you could also split the U.S. into a couple different teams. You could have like a U.S. West, a U.S. East team, or a U.S. Central if you're interested in. Another idea is you could also merge certain nations together. So you could have an example could be like the Balkan All-Stars. So you could have like Serbia, Croatia, and Slovenia all combined together to form a national team. So I think this is an interesting idea because what we saw with the Four Nations face-off as well as the World Baseball Classic, when players are representing their nation, when they're putting on their nation's colors, there's a lot more pride and it's very hard to just phone in the game. It's like when you watch the Olympics, there's a lot of pride that everybody takes in representing their country. So having national representation in these tournaments would seemingly motivate players to just perform better for the sake of their nation, right? So this is a way that you could do it to promote national pride. Another example that we could do is the Four Continent Tournament. So we could have North America, which could mainly include the United States and Canada. We could have Europe, which could include 63 total players in the NBA right now. Yeah, we could get Luka in there. So we could get players like Luka, Jokic, Wemby. We could get a lot of players in there. We could get the Wagners in there. We could have the Oceania continent as well, which would include Australia and the one New Zealand player in the NBA. And also we could have Africa. I think there's currently 18 players in the NBA who are from Africa. You know, through there, you could get a little more pride as well. You could get some competitive basketball. I'll say compared to the Four Nations tournament, this brings about a lot less national pride. I think that it's different competing for Team USA versus Team North America or Team Slovenia versus Team Europe. I think it's harder to get people motivated for their continent. I don't have a lot of pride from being from North America. I have a lot of pride from being from the United States, though. But it would allow there to be more competitive teams, especially with the U.S. being able to compete very well against Europe. If you wanted to, you could break down Europe, the United States and Canada into their own nations as well. But it's an interesting idea. There would unfortunately not be enough representation from South America. I believe there's only one player currently in the NBA from South America, and there's not a lot of Asian representation in the NBA right now. So the final idea, which I think would be the most reasonable, would just be to do a Team USA versus the world, which they've done in the past. There's been competitions of Team USA versus the world. And I remember when I first heard this idea or saw this idea, I thought like, man, what does the US think? They're just like, hey, everybody come compete against us. But then when you look at it, you're like, okay, the majority of players in the NBA are from the United States. So I think this would be a very fun game to do. The whole goal is to just get Giannis, Luka, and Jokic on the same team together. That's what we're all trying to do here. So I think Team US versus the world would actually be a lot of fun to watch. Interesting to see how much pride each player would take on the world side of the game, but I think it would be very fun. And I think this would be the easiest one to actually implement by the NBA. We have a quote from Giannis where he said, "I would love that. I think that would be the most interesting and most exciting format. I would love that for sure. I'd take pride in that." So even there, you saw Giannis, who would be on the world team, right, saying that he would take pride in beating the United States. So I don't know. If there were a change, I think I'd like to see this done. But I think overall, I agree with your point that it's tough to complain about the All-Star game when the NBA is such a long season, and in the era that we are in now with load management and three-pointers, we're just playing the game differently, and it's hard now to try to just pick out this one weekend to say, well, you need to play the game differently than how all 82 games are played with load management and three-pointers. Now you want this one game to be high defense, two-pointers, and everybody playing the full, 40 minutes of the game. I think it's just a tough thing to get into, but overall, it's just tough to watch. The All-Star game sometimes.
All right. Well, Connor, do you have anything else to add about the Four Nations tournament or the NBA All-Star game, or anything else you want to say?
I don't think I do. I think this was a fruitful conversation. I think I learned a little bit more about international hockey, international basketball. No, I don't think I have anything else to add.
Yeah, I agree. I think just my main point would be, like we said before, the NBA has changed. It is not your daddy's NBA anymore. And I think instead of being upset at what is happening right now, I think celebrating what the NBA has become and appreciating how talented these players are nowadays at their specific skill set. Maybe that's making the three-point contest being the culminating event instead of the All-Star game or the dunk contest. But I think celebrating what we have now and celebrating the players we had and still trying to have fun instead of tearing everybody down for the whole weekend, that's what I would want to happen.
Now, I'll still say I don't want the All-Star game to get off get off scot-free here. They
True,
still
true,
need to understand
true,
that they
true,
need
true,
to
true,
fix
true.
this.
Yeah, you're right.
I just want to end with that.
100%. Yeah, no, you're right. But that'll do it for today's episode of the Chicagolandians. Please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And make sure to shout our podcast out to any of your friends. If you want more Chicagolandians content, you can find us everywhere on social media at Chicagolandians. We've got some TikToks that are absolutely blowing up right now, YouTube shorts that are going crazy, and Twitter posts that are sparking a lot of conversation. But thank you again for listening, and with that, we will leave you with a bear down.
Bear down, baby.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Chicagolandians. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or wherever you listen. And if you want more Chicagolandians content, you can find us everywhere at Chicagolandians.